of 5?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Great. Yeah. 1. Oops, bring this here.
Yeah.
They're not going to look at me anyway. They're going to look at you. You look much better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, good. All right. Okay.
Are we pretty candid? Are we live?
We're live.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I try to make it as comfortable, informal as possible. One thing I will say, because I was doing a little bit of research on you, and there's a lot. Yeah, I mean, it was really, and I was asking myself, why haven't you been interviewed before? Because there's a lot of stuff that you put out 2 books, first of all. And then, I mean, I saw 2 books. There are more on my
No, just 2 so far.
Okay. The first one was in 2020, and the last one was last summer, wasn't it, when it was released?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you get that?
No, he's got it. Better get it soon.
Oh, yeah. Let me make sure my phone's on stun here. And so I thought, well, why? But one cool thing I saw that you did was you interviewed your black belts.
Yeah.
Which that's, I think involving your people that way, very powerful.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't know if you
I
know.
need to do more of that. That was a good idea. I haven't done it in a little while.
I think it adds a certain, well, I mean, it adds community, of course, but
Right.
and inclusion. I don't know if you know anything about Dog Brothers at all.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I mean, I haven't done it, but I one of my original, my first Alvis, my first coach. Yeah, he was one of the original Dog Brothers,
Yep.
and he would always talk about it and show video. And like, I thought the guys were insane because they're doing jujitsu like us, but they're also beating each other with like sticks. So
yeah.
it's like these guys are nuts, but really cool.
Well, yeah, and the thing I liked about it the most, because we started filming in the mid '80s,
Yeah.
which is Precambrian.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, and editing and everything was it was VHS
Right.
back then. So I mean, again, real primitive. But my favorite part was interviewing the players because they're the ones who are making it happen.
Yeah.
And when I saw your interview with them, I thought they're the ones making it happen.
Yeah.
And that's what adds adds the glue to the whole thing.
Right.
But as I'm doing that, I go, why hasn't, because I looked Travis interview and nowhere did I see
I've done a few, not a ton. Yeah, there's a few out there.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't see any, so I'm like, well, maybe he has, maybe he hasn't, but here we are.
Sure.
So since in that case, so today's date is the 4th of June, 2024, and so I usually get the timestamp in there.
Yep.
So that, all right, so let's start with the beginning. Your birthday?
7/7/81.
Coming up.
Yeah.
Okay.
About to be 29 plus a few. No, about to be 43.
So let's start with your martial art background. I know it's in the back of this here, but hearing it from you first.
Yeah, I mean, I basically around like 8th to 9th grade, I had a buddy who rented like the first UFCs on VHS. I think it was UFC 2 was the first one I saw. And I mean, a lot of people I think that got into jiu-jitsu, not modern day because it's become so popular, but back when the UFCs were in their infancy, there were only a few people exposed to that. And I was really lucky enough to find it at a pretty young age. And so my friend rented those. We watched them. We did kind of like backyard wrestling, which is a terrible idea because
Throwing chairs or jumping off.
Yeah, well, I mean, not even like pro wrestling, like backyard UFC.
Okay.
Not punching, but like we'll just do the grappling. And so remember Dan Severn, like there's the UFC where he does the suplex on Anthony Macias, and we're trying to do that to each other, and just all the things that could paralyze and kill a person. We were trying to do it, and then eventually, my mom actually found a school that had jiu-jitsu. Now it wasn't really jiu-jitsu. It was a guy that had a traditional school, but had done some work through seminars with the Gracies and the Shadows. And that was Champions Martial Arts with Tom Fowler. And this was like 97 or 97, 98. And so I started going there. It was very limited jiu-jitsu program, but it was enough where I was like, oh, I'm actually learning. I'm not just watching, the UFC and trying to imitate what Royce Gracie is doing. And so I was able to do that. And then eventually found out about Alvis, who was one of like 4 schools in the whole city that actually had jiu-jitsu. And that one was only a 45-minute drive. So it was the closest one. So I started training there, and then that was it. I loved it so much from the beginning. Like I said, I feel so lucky to have not only found something like that, but that I was passionate enough to pursue it, because I don't know what other direction I would have gone in. I didn't have anything else, and we didn't have money for college and didn't have the grades for a scholarship. And so it was like, well, this is something I'm going to dedicate myself to and try to make my life's work. I didn't know if you could do it as a business. I was like, but I'm still going to do it. Yeah. And,
did you find you can?
Yeah, you can make it work really well, but you have to suck at it and struggle for a long time. It's just the same path with business, I think, is that with jiu-jitsu. It's like, you're going to be bad at it. You better love what you do and smile during the hard times, or you'll get frustrated and quit. And so with jiu-jitsu, it was always fun, but of course you lose, you tap out, you show up again. It hurts, but if you can come to appreciate the aches and pains of training, then you can apply that logic to whatever else you pursue. And then everything becomes learning. Then it's just kind of like, oh man, I remember when I first made a little bit of money and I invested into some marketing opportunities and lost everything. And it's just
what kind of marketing opportunities?
Man, I've tried everything, and I still try new things, and some work and some don't. I think one time I spent like $15,000 on a movie theater ad to have my ad placed like in a movie theater before.
Oh, really? Like an AMC movie theater?
Yeah, and I was like, this is perfect. There's like thousands and thousands of people. They're all going to see the ad. And it turns out like they were showing it at a time when very few people were in there. I don't think I got one enrollment from it. Yeah. I got like 2 calls over a 6-month period. But what are you gonna do? It's just like, all right, I'm not gonna do that again. Or maybe my commercial was wrong, but you have to accept responsibility for what you do.
What did work, or what have you found has worked?
I mean, like the basics, like obviously like the internet works pretty well. If you know how to run ads, you have a team that can do that. Referrals are always the best because it's somebody who's training at your place. Yeah, and they're telling someone they care about to come do something that has enhanced their lives. So it's not me on a video or some ad saying get your kid involved, but it's saying, hey, my kid is doing great. Would you like your son, because they're friends, to join and then come in and try it? So that's always preferred, right? That's always the best way to do it, but it's really like what my business mentor, has told me is like, there's not one ad source that gets you 100 students. There's 100 things that get you 1 student each. And you have to be trying different things. And when things fail, not get upset, but actually be glad. Like, I'm glad I figured that out. Yeah. Because now I don't have to do it, or I have to do it differently.
Or you're closer to the next thing that might work.
Yeah. I mean, really, like, that's exactly the same as jiu-jitsu. If you get pissed off when you get tapped out, then you will be consumed with the emotion of the loss as opposed to correcting the problem. And then you'll just be like, oh, I suck, I'm not doing it. Or you'll say, I'm not doing that move anymore, it doesn't work for me. It's like the move works. You're doing it incorrectly. You need to adjust how you're doing it, and you need to be aware of the context of the fight, and then choose your time wisely.
Well, for example, that one move may work for this guy, but because he's got a different body type, you have to adjust it, like you're saying, to your body type.
Exactly. No two bodies are the same. No 2 businesses are the same. You have to understand that and not make excuses and not blame the marketing.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
So,
Well, you mentioned there's some other martial arts that you are involved in. I've gone into Muay Thai was one of them.
Yeah. I mean, I did Muay Thai off and on for years. I don't do it very much anymore. I got into it pretty intensely for a brief period when I had the one MMA fight that I had. I was like, I better learn how to punch and kick if I'm going to get in a cage and fight. And I never really liked MMA that much. I love watching it, but I was like, I don't think I want to do it. But at that point, I had coached so many fighters. Like, I coached a lot of our, fighters here, but then I worked with Eve Edwards and Andrew Craig, like most notably in terms of like the UFC and, Todd Moore, who's one of the coaches here, he's fought in some of the big organizations. I was like, well, I'm coaching a lot of guys. It would be great to have this experience one time. And I was like, I'll do lightweight, amateur fight, and if I like it, maybe a couple of those. And I ended up doing welterweight, pro. Because they just had trouble finding anyone there.
Yeah.
And they're like, this guy will do it. He normally fights 185, but he'll drop to 170 for you. I'm like, but I weigh 170
normally.
And and what's interesting about that is my opponent knew that I was a grappler, obviously, because I'm more known for that. It was a black belt, and so he was very prepared. I had a hard time taking him down, and didn't get to. When I did take him down, I didn't have a lot of time to work on the ground. And so I won the fight more with leg kicks than I did with grappling. I had the grappling exchanges that were pretty good, but my boxing was not good. But I could kick you in the legs.
Kicking the legs,
yeah.
yeah.
So that was it.
It's interesting because Drew would talk about when he was coaching Philippe.
Yeah.
For example, Philippe was he's very strong on the ground too.
Yeah.
And he says you'll get to this point, and then after that you will have a hard time closing. Because everyone knows.
Yeah, they know, and they don't have to. They can play the MMA game in a way that favors their strengths and avoids what you're doing. Because a grappling match, you both have to grapple, right? Just like in a boxing match, you both have to punch, right? But when there's an open-ended number of techniques and strategies that you could have, like in a real fight, that's why you saw so many guys in the beginning, like post Hoist Gracie era, when people were catching on, like I can't get touched by the jiu-jitsu guy. I got to stay away. A lot of those jiu-jitsu guys got destroyed because they just came out with the hands out, throwing the Hoist Gracie kick and dove in. And then people learned how to sprawl and punch. And then guys would pull guard, and they realized it's actually not that hard to pull guard in a fight and just do whatever you want, because people learn posture and then they punched. And so there's very few people that are well adapted to do that. You have a few, like you had Damian Maia, and who could really use jiu-jitsu off of his back, but the pure jiu-jitsu guys that didn't learn the rest of the game tended to get beat up pretty good.
Pounded.
Yeah.
I saw that too, and I was watching because when I was at when the first UFC came out, I was a student of Carlos and Higgin and Joe Jack back in California. And they're like, oh, it's our cousin is going out there. And he shows up in a gi.
Right.
And I'm like, everyone else is in Speedos or, like that. And
like Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, right. And I'm not, because Ken Shamrock came to the gym about a month or two after that.
Yeah.
And just rolled with Higgin for
Right.
a while. But I remember looking at that and I thought, everyone's got no top on and just the Speedos. And I thought, I've done that. You stick to the gi like flypaper.
Right.
I said, that you can get away with.
Yeah.
But come the third, fourth, fifth iteration of UFC, people figured out, don't go to the ground with them and just pound. Pound.
Well, during that era, no one was really a mixed martial artist.
Right.
Including the Gracies, because they had a system that was unbeatable compared to any other individual art, right? So it was just like, unless you got a lucky punch, which almost no one did that I recall, the grappler was going to grab you. So much easier to grab a whole body than it is to land a perfectly placed punch to the face. So if you didn't know how to grapple, you were going to get taken down and beaten. Nowadays, nobody who doesn't train everything has a chance. In other words, if you're not well versed at everything, you're not going to make it to the highest level. You have to be very competent in your striking, in your clinch work, in your wrestling, in your grappling.
Which is a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. Yeah, it really is. And they're constantly improving because the game is now changing where it's a legitimate, independent sport. It's not, no one's deciding if boxing is better than jiu-jitsu. It's like, well, no, in these rules, jiu-jitsu is going to win. But if you take that out, the boxer will win. It's like, no. You can do all these things. So you must improve and become competent in everything.
All that, and imagine you throw a stick in.
Yeah, exactly. yeah, that would change the rules too. Yeah, because now you have broken forearms, so there goes your grips and your punches.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of your instructors. I saw it here, but you talked about Alvis. You went to Brazil
Yeah.
For how many years?
I just went for a little over a year, about 14 months. Yeah. Yeah, when I went to Brazil, I had different instructors. It was very, it was so interesting. It was like one of the best times of my life and some of the best training ever. But the structure was very sort of Brazilian culture. It was like show up whenever you want, leave whenever you want. Geese don't have to match. It's different now because things have grown and legitimate.
More money.
You know, yeah, yeah, exactly. But I remember back then it was just like you didn't know who was teaching or what you were going to learn, or you just knew that there were going to be a lot of really tough badasses there to train with and beat you up every day. And so I think as like a foreigner, you really had to take responsibility for getting the most out of your training. It's like, okay, I'm gonna be friends with that guy because he's got a body type and style that's similar to me, and he's better than me. I'm gonna ask him, how he's doing this.
Yeah.
And you just really tried to sort of absorb as much as you could independently with a lot of different people that you worked with. Not that the instruction, just from the class instruction at that time, I learned a ton of technique I'd never been exposed to. But the organization was just all over the place, but I like it, but I would never recommend anyone run a school like that. I don't think it would work in the States, and probably not even that much, as much as it did in Brazil anymore. But the memories are priceless because it was just so cool to be, immersed in that culture and not speaking the language and all that.
They're like, wow, you really do this.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I met Higgin and I met Carlos, Carlos did all the talking. Higgin barely spoke English at the time. Yeah. And so he goes, yes, we see this. That's pretty out there. We can help you with the groundwork.
Right.
Because we were total amateurs.
Sure.
It was amateur hour on the ground. I did some high school wrestling. Different.
Yeah.
And so fast forward about 2 years later, we get but we got our script and everything done. We're filming, we're in the studio, and tape 5 or 4 or 5, whichever one we were doing it. We had like 2 days, and it's production time. The owners there, the Panther Productions. I don't know if you remember them at all.
Yeah.
That was their gig. They were the tape people, and they said, all right, Carlos is going to be here. So Carl pragmatic, and I like things like this. I'm not OCD. But I just like order.
Right, yeah.
And because things work better that way. And it was, like you said, it was kind of all over the place. Anyway, so Carlos, once we got him in front of the camera, he shined.
Yeah.
He was great, and he did this, and I'll show you that, and this and that. But boy, getting to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
was just, my heart was
the behind the scenes is always a different story than the final product.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good story. You should leave it in.
No, we're not.
I know.
Maybe after they die.
Yeah.
Or I die. All right, so we talked about the training, competitions. You've done some competitions. Training, you talked about how you had to train differently for an MMA fight.
Yeah.
Right? Because the world is, I would say it's adapted to what BJJ brings to the table, which was, devastating to most artists. I remember when Horian put out this tape. He would go, and this is where I lived in California. He would go to these different dojos, and challenge.
Yeah. Gracie
he'd
challenge.
Sometimes slap their ass all over the place. And like, oh man.
Yeah, that's how they got started in America. Yeah. It's kind of a crazy story to think about it, but it's also like the stuff that's why there's such a legendary, family, and that's why this, everything great, it comes with a great story, right? It's like the hardship, it's the challenge and everything. And that story, like, now you can't do that. Now they're like, that's just, that would be bullying. That would be wrong to do it. Like back then, badass idea. Really cool idea,
Yeah.
So.
And pretty Brazilian when you think about it.
Super Brazilian.
Yeah.
Like, we can kick their asses. Let's go do it in front of their students and family.
It's almost like one of those, the Chinese chopsaki movies where the guy comes in and challenges the master. And they go back.
But I remember watching those tapes too.
Yeah.
And like what I got from it was just kind of like, man, this stuff works. That by the time I had seen it, I had already seen the UFC. So I kind of knew it worked. But then seeing it, you just
They
imagine.
did that before UFC.
Yeah. Could you imagine if you were like one of the academy owners, like you come from a culture of sort of believing that your method, your style is superior. Like everyone thinks their religion's the best, right? And so if you go, then I bet a lot of them gladly accepted the challenge. You know, they're kind of like, oh yeah, we're going to knock you out immediately. And then you see a lot of them, and you hear stories about them getting taken down, choked out, and they're like, one more time, because they just couldn't believe what happened. Like, let's do it again, right? And I remember those days.
And it wasn't anything, we wouldn't consider anything fancy. He just closed, boom. And
No, it was actually pretty ugly by what we know about MMA today.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if anyone from the past tried to fight somebody that way?
Yeah.
They would get knocked out, or they get sprawled on and knocked out, or if they got to their back, they would still get knocked out. Like it's so different, right? It's so different today. But if you don't have the right tools, it doesn't matter how much you believe in what you're doing. You have to have the right tools for the job.
Right.
And so,
and it'd be like comparing an NFL team today versus, say, the 60s.
Sure.
Technology, training, strategy.
I think that's almost every sport. And you hear about, people from past generation, just talking about like, name the sport. The football players of my day would have crushed these new guys, because these new guys, they're pussies and they complain and they're weak. It's like, yeah, but they got better tools.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense that you have all the advantage of everything we've learned over history, plus the internet that allows you to watch and learn as much as you can at a fast pace. Plus, you can hire the best coaches, and you don't have to like mail them a letter to
Worst
get
case,
contact.
you can Zoom it.
You can just, you can. So, no, it makes no sense. The fighters of today are better than the fighters of the past. The jiu-jitsu players are better. It doesn't mean that the last generation wasn't great. They had to figure it out through trial and error. But now there's so much testing that's been done that we have the advantage of what everyone sort of sacrificed and dedicated themselves to there before. I tell people, people are so lucky today, because if you go to any local academy, you could walk into a class and there's a good chance there'll be a black belt or even a few black belts on the mat. And when I started, there were I think Carlos Machado was the black belt in Texas. And there were a few.
That was up in Dallas too.
And he was in Dallas. So if you wanted to train with that level, you had to go to Dallas. And a lot of people did. And there were a few that would pass through doing seminars. But in terms of having that expertise, you had to travel, you had to buy videotapes and watch them and rewind them and watch them again. So, yeah.
I'm going to stop this right now because the files get big and it's easier for me to transfer.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me stop quick. Some of the guys ahead of me would just go on and on and on. I'm like, can we get to the point?
Right. Yeah.
We're trying to hit somebody. Let's start with that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, back for more. Okay, I'm going to start this off. This is end of part one. The importance. I don't have to tell you this, but I mean, the importance of jiu-jitsu or any martial art, for example, for self-defense.
Yeah.
How do you explain that? I mean, because there's a sport, there's practicality applied, let's say. Because how do you approach that with people coming in here, or even explaining what we do here, what you do here?
I think in terms of self-defense, the truth is, hopefully, you don't have to use this to defend yourself ever. But the weaker you are, the less competent you are defending yourself, the more likely you one day will have to. Meaning, sort of, bad people prey upon weak people. It's there are tells to a weak person: their posture, their tone of voice, their demeanor. A confident person walks upright, they look you in the eye, they shake your hand, they speak with confidence. They don't get messed with that much. It's not that they couldn't. It's not that, anything could happen to anyone. It's that in terms of real self-defense, that's something that's not always discussed. It's, well, if they pull a knife, you're going to grab it like this. And if they punch you, you're going to defend it like this. And it's really, do you believe that you're competent enough to protect yourself and your family if something happens? And that only comes through training and repetition. And if you don't have that confidence, it doesn't matter if you've gone through a seminar. You're going to freeze the moment that you have to do anything. And so a seminar or a clinic is a great way to, give somebody a false sense of confidence and hopefully be the catalyst to get them to realize, I should do this ongoing. I should learn a skill set that I can use in a situation where if I'm in that sort of fight or flight response, stage and I have to react, I just react because I've drilled it and I've trained for so many hours and so many years. So I think that's what's really important, whether it comes to bullying or whether you're an adult having to protect yourself. But that's something that only comes through time on the mat and the realization of what is the reality of combat. We're talking about this with the Gracie Challenge. So many of those people had their reality destroyed when they realized I can't do a thing. I can't do anything. Versus if you're in here and somebody pins you and you have, I can't move. I can't do anything. This person's going to tap me and there's nothing I can do. But I can ask what I should have done. And then tomorrow I can do something a little different. And over time I become competent. And then pretty soon I become skilled. And then if I do it long enough, I will actually master this. And then there's a great deal of confidence that comes with just how you conduct yourself, how you lead your life. So I think that's something. I know that's not maybe the stock answer for how does it help you defend yourself? It's because you can take them down and choke them out. It's really, it puts you in a mindset where you're more self-aware. You're aware of your surroundings. You have the confidence to defend yourself and your family. And people don't mess with people like that nearly as often as they do. Look at the weak person. Look at the person distracted on their phone with their shoulders down, with their headphones on, with their wallet halfway out of their pocket. Easy target, right? So I'm not sure if that was your question.
No, that does, because you brought up something that which segues into my next question here, about a false sense of security sometimes. Because we've both seen academies, dojos, what are you going to call it, give you this sense of, if someone pulls a knife, I'll do this and I'll woo, 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 woo. Yeah. And as a knife guy, I'm like, it's a dream.
Yeah.
It's exactly. Not even, it's barely even that.
Right.
It'll never happen.
Yeah.
So what I run into from time to time is people saying, well, what is the point of learning a martial art anyway?
Right.
Because most of it's fantasy. And besides, shit like that, sorry, stuff like that.
I don't mind.
Yeah, I know he doesn't mind, but right. Our viewers at home, stuff like that, just let the police handle it. Let the government handle it. It's just, don't bother. It's not your, just let them handle it.
Yeah.
Response.
Right. Yeah. Are you talking about response to the person that says that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, hopefully they will handle it, but it may be too late by the time they intervene. Right. And there's so much that goes into, if you become a competent martial artist, your entire world will change and everyone around you will thank you for that.
And that is because?
That is because you've armed yourself with skills they're rare, but there are tools that you can apply to your relationships. You can apply them to your career, your business, your work, and you could actually, I don't want to overshadow that you could actually save your life. Anyone who says, it couldn't do anything. Yeah, there are situations where things will never happen, but I think it comes back to what I was saying, just a moment ago. It's Just imagine if the majority of people walking around on the streets were confident and competent.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how you would measure. I wonder what it'd be like if you measured crime in a sort of like alternate universe like that. I think it would be
That would be
very
an
different.
alternate universe. Well,
You know?
let me ask you this though, but
Yeah.
you've been around long enough. We both have been around long enough. I just get the sense, and it might be my paranoia. I just get the sense that there seems to be an attempt to make people more vulnerable.
Oh my gosh. This, yeah, we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, well, we only have like
Yeah, I
so
know.
much memory.
I'll try to keep it. I'll try to keep it short. I hate it. I think it's.
Do you feel it though?
Oh, it's impossible not to. I think there's it's bizarre to me too. Not only do I think it's wrong, I find it so strange. Like it is, it's like the attempt to sort of indoctrinate people into believing that you are not responsible for yourself. You do not need to become strong because
We'll do it for you.
we'll do it for you and we'll take care of you. And there's something beautiful about being weak and vulnerable. And I think that's very wrong. Vulnerable is one thing. Like if I tell a secret, I share something that was painful, that vulnerable is fine. Like telling a story, but not becoming strong, like saying, I am a weak person. This is who I am. Well, for hundreds of thousands of years, all those people died.
Early.
All those people were killed, they were eaten, or they were taken over by other people who saw that. And even if you have a government or a society that protects you, you're not protected because there's always a predator who's going to recognize your weakness and be willing to exploit it one way or another. Even if it's not physically, you will still lose the game of life by not becoming a strong person and not taking responsibility for what happens to you. And even if like, I'll put it this way, like some people have had the darkest, worst lives, and the things that happen to them, whether their parents are abusive or they're molested, just all the terrible things that happen to people, that was not their fault. But that still doesn't solve their problem. It's like the only solution, and it's unfair, but the only solution is you have to step up and say, I am taking full ownership of this, and I'm going to go in this direction. Because the people that hurt you are not going to save you. The government's not going to do it. All the people that pat you on the back and say, it's not your fault, it was somebody else, and you just need to be, they're not going to do it. And I wouldn't trust them if they said that. And so even if it is unfair, there's no way out other than to say like, okay, I'm going to be the one that fixes my problems and I have to own it. And I cannot just like point the finger at somebody else. And people do that. It's like the concept of forgiveness is so great because it allows you to get past the thing that you hate, the thing you're angry at. So if it's your parents, if it's like an ex, spouse, or if it's somebody, some former employee or whoever it is, it's like at some point you might say, yes, they were the reason that I was hurt, but now I don't want to be hurt anymore. I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to be this weak person because the last thing I'll say, I understand it's tempting to be a victim because you get coddled. People say it's not your fault.
Today.
Yeah, especially today. And it's comforting. And when we like the attention that comes with that, but it's like a drug that's going to kill you. And if you think that feels good, the comfort of being a victim, then you haven't ever felt the wondrous impact of being confident and being somebody who can like move through life saying like, I'm going to figure this out. It doesn't mean you do it, like you don't do it alone. You get help from everybody. Like I've done nothing alone in my life. I always had help and I had mentors and I had coaches, always. But in the end of the day, you're like, okay, this worked. That's good. This failed. I need to fix it. Not it failed because of this person or that person. So that should be the goal, to become that kind of person.
Cool. All right.
Sorry.
That was good.
That gets me upset.
It's interesting because I've asked people the same question.
Yeah.
And the response is real simple because most martial artists who do this are adamant about, taking care of themselves and not relying on some external force like the government, for example, and we have a lot of police guys in our group.
Right, yeah.
And I'm sure you have some too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I asked one of the guys, I said, what do you think about that? And he goes, if you need us there in 10 minutes, we'll be there in an hour.
Exactly.
I like, and this is from them. Yeah. The guys who are boots on the ground. So I mean, it's a question I ask because
it's a good one. It's an important question. Everyone's afraid to ask it too. I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people, they're afraid to even touch on the subject because you're supposed to be sensitive and quiet, and I think that's
bullshit.
BS. Yeah. I was going to say it, but you're correct.
There you go. You said BS. I said bullshit.
I think it's bullshit. It's like what do you hope to get out of the next generation of kids by teaching them this? Like, what is your end goal? It can only be you're either mistaken or you have an agenda that serves you. Right? I think it's both.
Is it that stupid or that evil? Is the question I ask.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a form of evil. I think something, if you realize something's stupid and you keep doing it, now you're approaching evil.
Yeah, something's going on there. Okay, I'm going to stop this file because this next one will be probably. Ta-da. There we go. All right. Okay, so like I said, I'm really surprised you haven't been interviewed to any extent. I mean, other than maybe something informal, because you got a lot of stuff out there to be interviewed on. When I was looking at first, of course, I read this book right after you signed it, and true story about this book. Travis went down to his. I was the only guy in League City who didn't know I was getting a black belt. Yeah. And I was like,
we tricked you pretty good.
Yeah, it was. And the hardest thing was that Nico told Angel, my wife, in June.
Yeah.
That he's going to get his black belt. How she sat on it.
Yeah. Wow, that's impressive.
I was impressed. She asked me I think it was like a month before we had dinner. She said, "When do you think you're going to get your black belt?" I go, a couple of years. That's like in the horizon somewhere over there. Anyway, so Travis comes in, has some of his stuff up there, and I saw the book, and I go, I love to read. Yeah. And so I picked the book up and said, "Hey, sign my book," right? Like a fanboy. And so he goes over, he kind of grabs, he's looking at me and kind of waiting. And so, I'll change over here. And he's like this. Yeah. I'm like, oh, wow, it must be really cool. Yeah. I didn't look at it until afterwards. Then when I read it, Yeah.
I remember when I wrote it, because it kind of revealed what was happening and you didn't know what was happening. I was like, I got to make sure he doesn't read this before.
No, it was good. I mean, and I just stuck it in my bag at that point, so I'll look at it later. But anyway, so I read it on the way to Hawaii from my friend Bert I was telling you about. Yeah. A couple of weeks later. It's an easy read. Yeah. And it's basically two stories, I would say is probably the best way to put it. Yeah. One is a lot of it's the first half is the philosophy, which is probably what I'll talk about mostly. But the second half is your experience in Sealfit. I think
Sealfit, yeah. Sealfit, and the event they had is the Kokoro. Yeah, so the two stories. One is like the stretched out, long version of sort of jiu-jitsu over the span of several years, and then the Kokoro is just one event that's 50 hours long. So that's just kind of like all the lessons. And I thought it was kind of an interesting parallel between the two because they're not really related. But I'd done both. So I found the connection and the concept. Well, they're related in terms of, like what you get out of them. But I don't think most people, the two don't go together.
Yeah,
you
you
know,
wouldn't think.
often in a conversation.
But the experience and probably, for lack of a better word, the spiritual development.
Yeah, it's a good
And
yeah,
character
it's a really good way to
development.
put it. Yeah, absolutely.
That you get. I mean, 50 hours. I don't think you slept, as I recall.
No, you don't get to sleep at all. There's one time where I thought we were going to sleep because we had to take a bus ride from Temecula to the coast, which is to like Encinitas, which is not far from Carlsbad. And that's about a 45-minute drive, I think. And I'm like, well, we'll get a nap here, but they don't let you sleep. First, they put you in a kid's bus. So it's like you can't sit. So your knees are like here and sideways, right? And you're with another person and you have to keep your ruck on, which is a big bag, filled with sand. And then they just start quizzing you on everybody's favorite, where they were born and their favorite color. So then later when you're in the midst of like going through all this hell on the beach, they quiz you. And if you get it right, you skip something. And if you get it wrong, then everybody does more punishing, grueling exercise, which nobody remembers anything at that point. You haven't slept. And that was the only time I had to like make myself hyperventilate because I'm walking on the beach for several miles in the sand. I start getting so sleepy. I try to persuade myself to like, I think I can sleep and keep my walking rhythm, which is insane. You can't do that, right? But I thought I wanted to sleep so badly, and then I kind of bump into a rock. I was like, if I do this, I'm going to fall and crack my head open. So I better so I just started kind of like doing some hyperventilating breathing because I couldn't stay awake. That was a part that just hit me so hard. This was on the second night, so probably hour 40 or so, 35 to 40 is when I was just really like, it was really catching up to me.
Yeah, I'll bet. So, well, and that's because there were the four. One of the things you talked about was actually, I got it here, as a matter of fact. First of all, before I get into that, you talk about the 7 rules of becoming a black belt, which kind of what culminated over the 20 plus years of your experience. One thing that caught my eye was number 6. Must be in a constant state of ongoing learning outside of jiu-jitsu. That was on page 3, I think it was. And then you brought up another point later on about keeping an open mind again. It was a slightly different context, but it was that if you're wrong, you got to admit you're wrong.
Yeah.
And be willing to change.
Yeah.
And I write notes and everything like that. So one of the things that struck my mind was that avoid dogma.
Right.
Do you find that a lot in jiu-jitsu?
Of course. I think that exists everywhere.
Yeah.
It's natural. Everyone has it. Most people don't know that they have it because we're usually so convinced that we're right. And because it feels good to be right? And one of my favorite quotes is the thing about being wrong is it feels exactly the same as being right. Right? It's like because if you don't know you're wrong, you think you're wrong. So it's hard to challenge because you can't actually live your life always questioning everything 24/7, or you wouldn't do anything. You're like, well, what if we're in a simulation? And what is it? You go crazy. So you have to be like, all right, this is what I believe. I'm moving through my life with this belief. But if someone challenges it, I'll listen and I'll stack that up against what I believe and what are the reasons for both of these. And then I'll, hopefully change a little bit to be a little closer to the actual truth. Right. And that's really all you can do is try to approximate something more true over time. But the jiu-jitsu example is, I'm old school, I do it this way. It's like, why? What if there's a better way to do that joke? Mm-hmm. Why would you not do it the better way? And they say, well, it might work for him, but I do it, this way. And, Roger Gracie is a great example. People think his jiu-jitsu is basic because he pressure passes you, mounts you, and does the X choke. He's doing 1,000 things that you don't see. An inexperienced person will look at that and say, like, that's the choke I learned on day 1. I learned the X choke from the mount, but I can't do it. I get rolled over or I don't have the right squeeze. It must be because he's just big and strong, right? Or it must work for him. And it's like, no, you're probably doing it incorrectly. If you're getting rolled, there's something wrong with your mount. If you're not getting the choke, there's something wrong with your position and your pressure. So you can do this with, almost anything. So like for jiu-jitsu to say like, I'm just going to keep doing it this way. It's like, well, then you're done learning. So you should quit because you're saying that you learned it the most perfect way possible from another human being 15 years ago. And they were perfect back then and nothing has changed and you've got the perfect. It's insane. Like we wouldn't do that with, I mean, I guess you can do that with anything, but
you wouldn't do that with technology.
no, you want to drive a safer car, right? And so you get that one. You're like, I like the old school engine. It's like, yeah, but you probably feel safer with the cab driver in the safest rated car, right? So you don't want him pulling up in the truck that you had when you were 16, right? It's like, so it only makes sense that there's more knowledge and technology. We have the advantage of everyone who came before us handing things down. It doesn't mean they got it right. It doesn't mean that our new version is the best way, but you should always be open to kind of challenging whatever you believe. That's tough because again, you have to get through life sort of like believe in some stuff.
Yeah,
but,
and there's a certain amount of ego you have to overcome as well.
Yeah.
Which, believe me, again, jiu-jitsu is no different than Filipino martial arts because there you have people who are on islands.
Yeah.
And they were king of the hill on that island. Now, the island might have been as big as Galveston.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole concept, like the island concept. If you're from a small town or a small academy where you never compete or train with anybody else and you're the best one, it's like, yeah, you must know all the best ways of doing something.
Yeah, well, and that's funny. But in jiu-jitsu, I think jiu-jitsu is kind of lucky because when it came to America, it was forced to evolve.
Yeah.
Because they were the top dogs in Brazil.
Sure.
And then when they came here, the first 4, they kicked ass because everyone's like, whoa.
Right.
And then people started catching on.
Yeah.
And that's where I go back to what Drew says. Yeah, it'll take you up to this point. And then after that, you better be good at these other things. Punching, kicking.
Yeah. Well, and jiu-jitsu really is it's really sort of a melting pot of martial arts ideas. It's not a singular thing. It came from judo. Judo came from traditional jiu-jitsu. Judo was an adaptation. The Gracies took judo and spent some more time on the ground, modified some of the techniques. Holes Gracie Sr., before he passed away, he would train sambo and wrestling and judo, and he would enter competitions in those. And then they all, would do, some form of like mixed martial arts competition. So to say this is one style is silly, right? Now jiu-jitsu is, now you have the no-gi game and the leg lock game, which was really taboo a very short time ago. And now you have people that both pull guard and just entangle each other's legs. And that's like the whole match. And some people, don't like it. But when someone taps out, you have to say that's an effective tool, right? It's like with the leg lock game, it's like, I'm old school, I don't like the leg lock. It's like, well, if we were fighting in a real match and you break my arm, I can still chase you down and kick you and punch you. But if you break my leg, I can't do really anything, right? And so everything is always growing. It's just, through marketing, you have, this is our style, but not really. It's everybody's contribution.
Yeah, and I remember with the Machados, they didn't show any leg stuff until you were, I want to say a brown belt.
Yeah.
At that time. Again, this is like early, mid 80s, late 80s.
Yeah.
I got my blue from Carlos and I got my purple from Higgin.
Yeah.
And then at that point, unfortunately, my work took me away from everything. And when I came back, they had moved yet again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things had changed. So, all right. I'm going to circle back to one of the points you brought up here and highlighted 4 laws of mental toughness, breathing, positive self-talk, visualization, micro goals.
Yeah.
The micro goals to me, when you put us, man, you are preaching to the choir.
Right.
Because that is real big. But the other thing was breathing.
Right.
And breathing, people underestimate, I think, breathing. Yeah. And your whole, like several pages on just breathing techniques and stuff like that. How did you get to that point?
Oh, I got this directly from being involved with the Sealfit. This comes straight from them. And that's something that's adapted from the actual Navy SEAL training, right? It's because those guys are sometimes faced with the most stressful situation where they could die, the people they're trying to save could die, their teammates could die, and they realize going into it that their chance of success comes down to being hyper-focused on the mission and what they're about to do. And so they teach them ways of regulating their sort of emotional state. And for most of us, we don't have to, nothing's life or death, but a lot of people still feel like they're in a life or death situation because they got into an argument with someone, or because they didn't get promoted at work, or because they just got, some bad news, or they're stressed out. And really what I think is so important about this is that you can change your emotional state by changing the way that you breathe. And it's not some mystical, like Buddhist monk idea that's like supernatural. It's like, no, you can hook somebody up with some wires and you can measure their brain waves and their heartbeat and their blood pressure, and you can see how it changes when they engage in this focused breathing. And so, and it's kind of like the concept of, of like you are not your thoughts. So at any given moment, you could have a thought where you're like, I'm kind of depressed, I'm kind of sad, or I'm anxious, or I'm irritated. And 5 minutes later, it can be completely different. And so thoughts and feelings are very fleeting, and they're not always you, but you can get stuck on one of them and becomes your identity. I'm a depressed, and this is not a thing about like depression, because there's the mental condition, but then there are just the emotional states that we all kind of go through. And sometimes we can get stuck in a low point. And again, not the medical low point where you actually need some intervention, but just something where like, oh, I'm more of a sad person. I'm more of a negative person. By nature, I'm more negative. I'm more angry. And it's like, well, you haven't challenged that, for one, and you're mostly probably not doing anything to change the state. And the quickest and easiest way to change that state is just to control your breathing. And then you immediately start to somewhat detach from this is who I am with this is how I'm feeling. And it becomes, there's a really cool concept, called like the witness, where you're observing it's like you're observing yourself separately. And then it becomes curious, like, oh man, like that guy cut me off in traffic. That really pissed me off. And I had thoughts of chasing him down and killing him. Isn't that interesting? But you don't do it because you breathe, you detach from that. And then you can, I'm not an expert in it. I use it as part of like my daily practice. And I noticed that I have much better days when I use this than when I don't. Right. And it's made a big difference.
When you told a story about the breathing. Oh, do you need
I need something. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Pause it here. Made me think of positive self-talk. So have you found, prior to someone, let's say someone comes in for the first time and they have this self-image, kind of a dark or just not positive,
right?
Doing this and doing some of the things that you do here, morphs change, or in how long, or what process does it take to get to that point where they start thinking of themselves more confidently?
Yeah, I mean, it's usually you. That's why you want new students to have little wins in the beginning, right? So if you just say like, okay, go with the most advanced person, or not even that, because an advanced student will take care of you, but go with the most athletic person, and then they just wipe the floor with you, and that's not always good. So you want to, as a coach, you want to sort of create an environment where somebody can feel some level of success with their growth, little bits at a time.
That would be a micro goal.
And that's a micro goal, right? And but the positive self-talk is something that every individual has to do. Now, you can speak positively to someone. I think it's much harder for us to do it ourselves. And so when you recognize that somebody is more openly negative, it's really just kind of, I think, challenging why they're doing that. I think I know why they're doing it. I think it's a very natural part of like sort of our evolution and adaptation, because it was very useful to be pessimistic a long time ago, because otherwise you got eaten by a big cat or something, right? So you had to be pessimistic.
Okay,
So you can't say like, today's going to be a great day, and then you go out and everything wants to kill you.
Yeah.
But we're still like that, and nothing's really trying to kill us, but we're still like, we still have that kind of pessimism, but it doesn't serve us the way that it used to. And the most successful people tend to be very optimistic, even though, and this is a weird statistic, but pessimistic people have a more accurate view of the world. But optimistic people are happier, they live longer, and they tend to accomplish their goals at a much higher rate.
Yeah, they get more done.
And there's a guy I follow, like business guy, he's talking about this, and he says like, I forgot how he said it, but it was like, in today's world, the Senate gets to be right, and what was it? Hold on. The Senate gets to be right, and the optimist gets to be rich. It's basically like, some of your thinking in positive thinking is a little bit delusional. It's a little delusional to believe that you're going to do something greater than normal, greater than average if you're an average type person. But the average person is not optimistic, so it actually makes sense. And so when you can shift your way of thinking to be more positive thinking more often, then you start seeing little changes. And I don't like you remember that book, The Secret, back in the day?
Yeah, that goes way back.
Yeah, I don't like that idea at all. I don't like the idea of just sit around and just breathe in the positivity and then money and women and greatness flow to you, because then you're saying, no, you have to go to work. Like go do stuff.
Well,
but the idea of like, I'm going to suck, right? I'm going to lose this match, let's say for a jiu-jitsu match, versus, I'm fighting the best guy in the world. This is going to be a big win for me. That little shift, this one is more likely to produce a better outcome. And then whatever happens, happens. But the more you do that, the more things the odds tend to increase over time. And in life, you have to play the odds because most of what's happening is not really in your control.
Yeah.
Right. You have to nudge things in your favor when you can.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, that's, I like the when I was going through this here, I said, boy, like I said, we need more time.
Yeah, we'll have to do another one.
One thing that struck me, because again, a lot of stuff is preaching to the choir.
Right.
Yeah. And you talk about the why.
Yeah.
Why is the student walking through the door, or the potential student walking through the door to do this? Why did you take it as far as you did? And your point that I could tell here is you've got to understand the why.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, you have a real true bearing on you. Mm-hmm. And so your why was what? Well,
I knew that I had a very rare opportunity to engage in something that I was passionate about, that if I didn't do it, I would regret it forever. Mm. I knew that was so important. I'll say this one thing, the why changes and evolves over time. Like I had my son just over 2 years ago. That changes a lot about the way
that picture?
Yeah. It changes a lot about like your why, right?
Mm-hmm. What was your why before your son?
Are you talking about like with the academy?
Yeah.
Like in general? Yeah. So martial arts for me changed. It changed everything because I didn't grow up optimistic or positive thinking.
Okay.
And I didn't have sort of that, that wasn't ingrained into me really. It was, I think I found it through martial arts, and that sort of opened up a window to like seek other avenues of experience. Like, I want to be a better communicator. I want to be a better coach. I want to be, competent in business and all these things. And I knew that because of what I had gained through martial arts, just being a kid that found something that geeked out on, thought it was jiu-jitsu was really cool. I thought it was really cool to choke people, right? And then that became something so great. And then over the years of working with people, I saw that like, this is a common theme. This changes people in a way that is positively impacts their lives with so much more than just like I'm good, I'm better at fighting. And so now there's an opportunity to share that with somebody, to share that with hundreds and really at this point several thousands of people. There's no limit as to the positive impact I could have if I just kept the focus on giving that experience to other people. And so that's enough, to kind of like to make that, focal point.
And that was up to this. But now, what changed in terms of the why after you had your son?
Oh, well, that's that's different because now it's like, God, that's a hard question to answer because
That's why I asked.
Yeah, there's such a primitive experience that happens when you watch your kid being born. Like I don't know how to describe it. It's like the universe, like all time stops, and you're like endowed with this like all the love of everything in the universe, and you have all the it's like you have all the answers to everything, and then it's gone, and you forget everything, and all you know is that's the most important thing. So that will kind of, that gets me emotional.
I know.
So, yeah. So that kind of throws you for a loop. You're like, oh man, it doesn't change that much. It's sort of like your connection with how strong your purpose is kind of like reunited. It's like, oh man, this is someone like, they didn't ask to be born. So, people say like, you hear parents like, oh, I gave everything to my kids and they owe me. And it's like, no, you owe them because you brought them in. And like, they didn't bring you in. Like, they didn't say like, I want to be born. It's like you brought them in. So you kind of owe a lot to them. And all you can really do, because you can't guide their entire life. You can't, protect them completely. And I think about it. I think I wrote this, at the end. It's like, I don't want them to have like an easy life. I don't want him to have a life free of pain or mistakes. I just want him to have, an experience that gives him a sense of this is all worth going through. This struggle is like well worth it. And so I think it just kind of reinforced a lot of the same things. I don't think it changed everything. I still have that same desire to give that experience to the people that I work with. But now he's watching, so I got to do a good job.
It kind of takes it to another level.
It takes it to a different level. It's hard. It's pretty hard to explain, but it's pretty powerful.
And you have one child?
Just one.
Okay.
Yeah. We're a little bit older. My wife's same age as me. For the last 6 or 7 years, we're kind of like, well, I guess it's not going to happen. And that's okay, because you don't have to have kids. Life is great. Life is still meaningful and you can do it. And then, and now I'm kind of like, I can't imagine not having this. Not at all, not at all. So
that's cool. That's awesome.
That's a thing of like challenging beliefs. And I still believe you don't have to, but once you do, you'll never be the same.
Yeah, I totally agree. Going back to the why, though, not for you, but for others.
Yeah.
And I'm going to focus mostly on other jiu-jitsu instructors.
Yeah.
Some of them I've run into, they started out the ideal, make the world a better place or make them a better person, make other people. And then sometimes, somewhere along the line, some of them will change and say they're doing it for the money.
Sure.
What do you say to that?
So I'll make it very clear. I don't think there's anything wrong with making a really good living at whatever you do. Mm-hmm. I think you can make as good of a living as you want. I think if you make it about the money, eventually you'll probably make less. Now, I'm not saying there's not some ways you can sort of con the system and do that, and you could certainly become a McDojo type and give out belts, you could start giving out black belts at 3 or 4 years if you wanted. And I know some places for that probably is the direction that some schools will go, although you don't need to make money. But I think what happens is let's say you can make money that way, right? Even though I think a lot of people that try are more likely to fail, but let's say you can make money that way. There's going to come a time where if you're not deeply connected with the journey and the relationship with your students, and let's say for some magic reason they stay and they keep paying you, or you just keep getting new ones, then the money is just going to become a stepping stone that you feel is not quite high enough, and you're going to want to step higher. And this is why you have millionaires and billionaires that still commit suicide, because they're attached to a particular level that they haven't got to. And as soon as they approach that level, they're like, oh, 10 million would actually be
better,
badass. I think, 5 million is not enough. I can see I'm going to do it. I want 10. And then you can just take that to all the money in existence and still be pretty lonely with each, step. So I think, but the other side of that, and I've seen plenty of instructors, go down this path. They're like, I'm not about business at all. And then they're just about great, awesome classes. And then they close after several months because they're not doing anything right. They're both stupid because you're not helping people the way you could.
They sound both extreme.
Yeah, they're both extreme. But some people might lean too much, and I think it's like if you become a good business person, and the best business people really care about their the people that they're serving, and I'm not saying there aren't wealthy people that scam people. I know that that's real. But as far as like longevity and real legacy that you're going to leave behind, like not that everybody says your name, because that shouldn't be the thing who's going to remember me when I'm dead, but more like what's the ripple effect you have on the people that you've influenced. If you do that right, and you learn marketing and you learn sales and you learn business, and these are all like bad words, like, oh, he's a business guy. Yeah, that's because he cares about what he's doing. Like if you think that what you're doing is valuable to the people in your community, and you're not shouting at the top of a mountain, like, come try me out. If you're not trying to get people in there, then what are you doing? Like that's, you're supposed to be trying to serve as many people as you can. But if you get hung up on like, oh, we had a bad month, and then if you're bitter in class, or you're not, if you lose that connection, if that connection becomes secondary to the money, then I think that's the beginning of the end. Right.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And the term I use is you lose the spirit.
Yeah, and you see people like that. They're like, oh, another damn day. Like,
it becomes work.
Yeah, it becomes work, and I get that. By the way, I'm not saying like I never have days like that. Because there are days like, man, I'm feeling a little burnout, and it's usually it's not the business. It's usually a combination of life going on. Like. And what do you have to do if you're an instructor? Like, you can't just walk out and be like, oh, man, I'm having a crap day. You have to be like, hey, how you doing? You shake everyone's hand. You smile, you bow in. This is going to be a great day. I'm so glad you're here. So you're still a human. It's not like you're actually always that character. But if you force yourself to be that way, then pretty soon it just becomes real. Because at your core, if that's really who you are, then if you have to fake a smile for 3 minutes, pretty soon you look around and you're like, that's pretty awesome. No matter how many days in a row you've done it, it's still a new experience for somebody else, and that should be what it's about. It's like,
So in a way, you got to discipline yourself to just do it.
Yeah, you have to get the job done. It kind of goes back to, and by the way, I've broken all these rules, and I'm still human, still like make all these mistakes sometimes. But it goes back to the idea we were talking about earlier about kind of the victim mindset. Like it is alluring. Like it is enticing, I think, subconsciously to be like
enabled.
It's enabled, and anyone, you can do it at any level though. Like I feel super spoiled in life to have gotten to do what I did. I have nothing to complain about, but I'll still complain in my mind constantly if I have a tough month, or if something goes bad, or if I'm having trouble with, staff, or if life is distracting me from, no, I shouldn't say life, it's all life, but if a personal is getting in the way of business, or business getting in the way of personal, and then the thoughts and the self-talk becomes like, oh, this is unfair. Why does this have to happen? And it's like, dude, get over yourself. Like, you're fine. Get over yourself.
Yeah, that's the
figure
positive
it out,
self-talk.
And go give your team your very best today and don't make it about you. Your problems will still be there, but you have an hour and a half or a couple hours to be involved in something you love, you believe in, and it's going to greatly impact everyone that you work with today. So don't screw that up. Go do it the right way.
Let's end on that.
Cool.
That was awesome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was great.
That was
Appreciate
fun.
it. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And I appreciate the candor.
Yeah.
Because
That's really good.
because I've been to not that I get it this way, but I just like the conversation, to be honest with you, and we could probably go on for hours.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And
well, this is the reason why like these types of long form content and podcasts are popular, because it's like it's not scripted. You want to see people's imperfections and all that stuff. So.
Well, and the thing is, like, as a part of what I'm trying to do, like Bert, my friend I was telling him about Hawaii, said get stuff. I call it inventory. He calls it content.
Yeah.
And so he says, just get stuff. And so I'm like, okay, I have like 1 million hours of stick fighting and other things like that. But I never really thought to even do this until he basically just did a Gracie slap on my head out of the 1980s and said, you got all this stuff, put it in there. And so I thought, wow. And then the guy who recommended, I was thinking about doing it with you anyway, but Ian,